Oh, let's see what time it is. Oh, it's Isaiah o'clock. Better talk about chapter 6. Welcome back, everybody, to our Isaiah study. If you would like our free PDF, you can download it on our website. There's a link down in the description. Let's go ahead and discuss this chapter. I told my wife that I was going to be done in 5 minutes so she can start prepping dinner, so I better actually do it today. In our timeline section, we mentioned previously that the prophetic ministry of Isaiah spans the reign of four kings: Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah. We're informed at the beginning of this chapter that the events in chapter 6 occurred the year that Uzziah died, so we're moving on to the second king. Key characters are going to be a little bit different today. So we have Isaiah, and then we have God, who's going to appear to Isaiah in a vision. And we also have these individuals called seraphim. These are spiritual beings that are there at the throne of God when God appears to Isaiah. They're described in a really interesting way. It says that they had 6 wings, 2 cover their face, 2 cover their feet, and 2 they use to fly. We'll get into that more in our outline. Just one word to define today, and that is the word terebinth, which appears in the last verse, verse 13. You may have a different translation if you're using a different version of the Bible, but a terebinth tree is a small tree native to the Mediterranean region. It's related to the cashew and the pistachio tree. Above God's throne were these beings called seraphim, and it says that they, as we mentioned, had 6 wings, and that they were saying to one another, quote, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory." This is a pretty common scene in the Bible whenever you have a description of God on his throne or God in glory, that there are beings around him singing his praises, talking about specifically how holy he is. And if we were there, we would be doing the same thing. And when the seraphim spoke these specific words, it says that the doors of the temple there were shaken and smoke filled the entire building. Isaiah immediately feels his smallness, which is a pretty natural response we see in the Bible to standing in front of the divine. So he sees his smallness, his insignificance in comparison to God, and he spoke of himself as an unworthy man to stand in the presence of God. He describes himself as a man of unclean lips. I think the general idea there is a sinful man in the presence of a holy God, but that's the term he uses, unclean lips. He says, "I have unclean lips, my people have unclean lips." And maybe he said that because he didn't feel fit to repeat the words of worship of the seraphim, or maybe it was because he felt unfit to be God's prophet and to carry God's message to the people because he knew that, he wasn't a perfect man. But then one of the seraphim took a coal from the altar, maybe the altar of incense in the temple, and touched it to Isaiah's lips, saying, quote, "Behold, this has touched your lips. Your guilt is taken away and your sins atoned for." So God has made Isaiah capable. He has prepared him through this purification to be his spokesman. And now Isaiah is going to be commissioned for his job in section number 2, verses 8 through 13. God's job for Isaiah. God asks, quote, "Who shall I send and who will go for us?" He's looking for somebody to do the work that he has in mind. And Isaiah immediately volunteers himself, saying that he is willing to go. If God had work that needed to be done, he would do it. So God commissions him to prophesy and to preach to the people of Judah, even though God knew that Isaiah's preaching would just make them more stubborn and more obstinate and more rebellious. They wouldn't listen, and Isaiah's preaching were just going to make them worse. But that's not a reason not to present the truth, right? You still preach the truth no matter how people respond to it. Maybe I should have made that our application for today, but I've got a different one. Now, Isaiah next asks kind of it's a reasonable question. He says, "How long, Lord, should I preach? How long am I supposed to preach this message?" And God told him to preach until destruction rained down on Judah, till their cities were desolate and the people were removed from out of the land. Speaking there, not in specifics, but I think mainly about the Babylonian captivity and exile that Judah was going to experience later on in history. God says that when his judgment is complete, that there's going to be only a small number of faithful who are going to remain. And these he described as a stump. So imagine like a tree. There's a tree that had been cut down and then it had been burned and only a stump remains. And that's how God describes this remnant of people that would remain who were faithful to him. So that's the 13 verses of Isaiah chapter 6. Isaiah's already been prophesying, but here we kind of see his formal commission, his formal appointment by God in this throne scene. So let's now finish up with our application today. So do you notice how eager Isaiah is to serve God when God asks for volunteers to work for him? He was very quick to respond, quote, "Here I am, send me," when God inquired about who was going to go preach to the people of Judah. And he even did that without knowing all of the specifics about what God was asking him to do. It's not until later on that he says, well, how long is this commission, Lord? How long do you want me to preach? Of course, God is still very active in our world today, and he has work that he's ready to assign to all of his servants. And God will happily work through those who are willing and eager. So question, do you have that same kind of eager attitude towards finding work for yourself to do in the kingdom? Or are you kind of laying back, maybe making excuses about why you're not capable of doing something, making excuses why you can, or why now is not the right time? You notice Isaiah, he's not a perfect man. He says, he acknowledges he's got faults, right? But God fixes those faults. God atones for him through that imagery with the coal, right? He deals with those faults, and then God sends him out to his purpose. We all have problems. We all have things that we feel incapable of doing. Look, God can fix those. He can fix those for the eager and for those who want to serve him. He can make up for those in all kinds of ways. So we need to be eager. That's really the application I think that we need to take away from this. The next time you're presented with an opportunity to serve him, take it. Or even better, go search out opportunities and ask for opportunities before they're even presented to you. I think sometimes people ask the question, it's like, well, why doesn't God have a special work for me? Why doesn't he use me like he used the prophets or something like that? That's your question for God. Well, God probably has a question back to you, and that is, well, are you as eager to work as these men were that we read about in the scriptures? That might help you get to the root of your question. So that's going to do it for today. That is our Bible study in Isaiah 6, and Lord willing, we'll be back tomorrow to tackle chapter 7.